You're listening to the OverFunctioning Leadership Podcast, learning leadership concepts through life experience. Hello, friends. Welcome to another OverFunctioning Leadership Podcast. I am Alex Christopher McMahon.
And before I get to my name, do we used to call our podcast something different?
It was just, I don't know. Was it something different?
We started off with
the. We did cut out the.
And podcast.
Yes.
So now it's what it's called.
OverFunctioning Leadership is our
brand
business name, our brand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The product we sell.
Thank you.
We are a product.
All right. I'm a product of the 60s, and I'm John.
And I'm Zachary Dwayne Stahl. I will not tell you my mother's maiden name, but if you come talk to me, I'll tell you.
Disclosing. Ooh, you're so mysterious.
Ooh.
Well, we are happy to have you once again. And today we're going to be actually talking about the age-old question of nature versus nurture. And as I did research on this, there were so many articles that said, there's been enough talk about this. Let's stop asking this question. So, hey, we're just going to do it anyway.
We thought we would just say even more.
We're a little behind. We'll get caught up.
Yeah, so it's going to be almost debate style, I would say, in
Pretty
some
close.
ways, in which I will be taking the nature side, and the loser here, Zach will be taking the nurture side.
Ouch.
In which John will be...
I'll be moderating, but playing
moderating.
favorites.
Yes, but playing first. Who, if you were going to be any type of moderator that we've seen, if you know them by name from any of the political realm, which person would you like to be as the moderator?
Glenn Beck.
Oh yeah.
I like to think that John's going to be more of a mediator than a moderator.
Yeah, well.
when this comes to blows.
He's going to let us fight it out.
I'm going to be a mediator, which it's about me.
Okay, good. Yeah, I like that. I like it. But before we get there, we are actually going to recap what we did last time in the last podcast, which was about are things getting worse?
Yes.
And that is all we have to say. No, actually, Zach, where do we land on are things getting worse, and what does that mean? What are we talking about?
We talked a lot about just the system that we live in nationally and how we can't really speak for Australia or Madagascar or any of those little island nations or really any nation other than America as a whole. But we're not certain that really things are getting worse, but they're definitely getting more anxious. And we talked about some of the ways you can see that, and just also we finished off by talking what we're afraid of. That whole what if, what is, and just the general anxiety that is permeating our society.
Oh, good. I was like, I don't remember talking about what I was afraid of. The dark, smelly socks, not putting on my deodorant before I go to work. I'm really afraid of that.
Spurgeon win.
Misha, terrified of Misha. She just barks.
There's going to be like 3 people who under the Spurgeon win. Anyways, oh boy. That was a recap of last time. And as it is accustomed to the OverFunctioning Leadership podcast, we go into our fable time from our great friend Edwin and his fables. We will tell a fable now, so please clean out your ears with a little buzz and a little, well, you're not supposed to, but the Q-tips, you're not supposed to do that, but you can risk it, right? Risk it.
Just don't go too deep.
Yeah. So anyways, John does have a fable as usual. John, go ahead, tell us about this fable of yours.
Well, the fable that I'm thinking of deals really well with the nature versus nurture topic, and human relationships are really complex. So all of us talk to different people, whether they're family or friends, and every one of us wants to have healthy relationships with people, and they tend to cause us the most trouble. We worry about them a lot. Among the 3 of us, I'm the only one that as far as I know, that's a parent. And
Misha doesn't count?
Misha does not count.
She's just a dog.
She's just a dog. She's a lower form of life.
How dare you?
And my roommate Jer doesn't count. Is that a big NO?
It's a big NO. But so this particular fable is looking at this nature versus nurture through the eyes of a parent. And so for those of you who are parents out there, or if you're not a parent, certainly you are parented by another, that the family generational process going down from earlier generations really impacts our current relationships. And when we try to lead others and try to be able to shepherd them along, for me personally, spending time thinking about myself and the way I relate to my father, my sister, my brother, and thinking about that carefully, I think it helps in my current relationships with my own family and then people from there. So if you get anything out of this podcast, it's that the nature piece is impacting you in ways that perhaps you're not aware of. And that, of course, then impacts the nurturing piece and how we relate to other people, whether it's in family relationships or friend relationships. So I hope you find the debate back and forth. I already know who's going to win. I'm going to stack the questions in certain ways to make that happen. Hopefully you can say, from this, I learned a little bit better how to relate to people separately, equally, and openly. So that's my hope.
Okay, well, it is. I feel like we need like a gavel or like a bell, or how do you start a debate? Somebody just yells. Good
evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to tonight's Nature versus Nurture debate. My name is Franz Klammer, and I'm here to talk to you tonight about an important topic. We have two people with us this evening. If gentlemen, could you introduce yourselves? From the nature side, we have...
Yeah, I'm Alex Christopher McMahon. I have a master's in biological sciences and an undergrad in integrated science.
Boring. Okay, next, let's get to the nurture side, please.
Hi, my name is Zac Duane Stahl. That's Duane. That's actually my father's name. My qualifications are I was raised by wonderful parents, Trish and Dwayne Stahl, and I went to school for computer science, and I'm socially inept. And so you know that I understand.
Time. Thank you very much. Okay. So let's start off this evening by giving our listeners a little understanding of what is nature and what is nurture. So I did a coin flip just now, and up came heads, and heads stands for Alex.
Oh, nature side.
Yes.
Yes, okay. So basically, when we're looking at nature, especially when it comes to leadership, we're going to be talking about specifically DNA. You were born specifically as a leader because of your genetics, and you have a predisposition to become a leader or form into the influencer that you are because of your genes.
So are you saying that for certain people who have certain DNA, they are prescripted to be a leader, and others who do not have that DNA are not?
No, yeah, and I want to make this crystal clear that when I talk about leader, I'm talking about influencer. So the definition that I'm going to be using as saying who is a leader and who is not a leader, I believe everybody is a leader, and their disposition to become a greater leader or influencer than others is because of their deoxyribonucleic acid.
Okay, you're Zac, that's your name?
Yes, I'm Zac.
You're talking about nurture. So can you share us a little bit about the nurturing piece that you've brought with you this evening?
Yeah, so nature versus nurture is the debate, and the nurture side of it basically is referring to the environmental factors that influence your development. And so while my opponent might be arguing that it is... after the union of your parents, your fate has been decided, I would say that it's how your parents raise you after that happens, and the environmental factors surrounding you.
So would you say that if one is not leading well, that the parents are to blame?
I would say that while they may not be to blame, they influence that largely.
They largely influence that blaming piece. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So, Alex, just the first question for you. If one wanted to be a good leader, but the family stock they came from was pretty crummy, what would you suggest?
Well, on the nature side, I would say that because you are predestined to have certain genes, it's going to be very difficult for you to overcome the poor leadership within your family because of the stock that you came from. I have several articles here that do talk about how you're predestined because of your genes to be the person that you are today. So there's one that just specifically talking about schizophrenia. We know that if somebody comes from a family through schizophrenia, that the schizophrenia is passed along. And so if you are born from somebody who has schizophrenia, you have a predisposition to have schizophrenia. That's just one example of a certain DNA typical. That was from Kettner et al., the article in 2000. I also have another article about conformity that is...
Can I stop you a second?
Yes. I'm just very excited.
No, I can tell. So our listeners might be interested in the schizophrenia piece. And you said if one person has schizophrenia, it's passed down generationally to another?
Yes, can be.
Can be. And so, Zac, if I can turn to you, is there any connection between the nurture piece and schizophrenia? How do you see nurture and schizophrenia?
Yeah. So I think that it's really the relationship between the child and the parent that helps to define behavioral responses, right? So John Locke, one of the leaders of the blank slate movement, as I'll name it, or tabula rasa, right? He really led this idea that we're blank slates to be defined by our environmental factors, right? When we look at who we were raised, who raised us? Let me correct myself as I stumble along. Who raised us? They are teaching us how to respond to certain anxieties and to triggers. And so when you're seeing this schizophrenic response, while there might be some genetic backbone to it, right? Largely what you're having is trained responses to anxiety, right? You have someone who is eliciting a response from someone else as a result of the anxiety within that system.
Well, I think so far nurture has the lead. So nature, you got some work to do.
Well, I mean, as we sit here and we talk about, and I know this could be undermining my own side here. We talk about Bowen family systems theory, and I'm pretty sure Murray Bowen dealt with people with schizophrenia, and so my opponent here had no mention of his name. So.
Point for you.
Poo-poo on you.
Oh, yes.
Now, you did talk about trained responses, and there's a common trained response that comes from conformity. So we talked about herding as one of the major things that comes out of leadership when anxiety is high. And in a study done by Chen et al. In 2018, they have some data that signifies that conformity itself can actually be influenced by genetics. Somebody can have the ability to be conformed more than others because of their genetics.
You said that study was 2018.
Yes.
So this is 2018 right now,
yes,
March. The study apparently was last week?
Well, it's published in 2018.
I see.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
A smarter person would understand that.
Well, between you and I, we have 2 master's degrees. I'll just leave it at that. How do you respond? How many master's degrees do you have?
I have no master's degrees.
Okay. All right. So far, you're losing. So if you could go ahead and offer your perspective on the nature part of what Alex talked about.
Yeah, so Alex is talking that the biology is informing a large part of conformity, that there are biological influences. However, Michael Kerr and Murray Bowen actually have suggested that while there's a biological root to behavior, right, you can take twins, and this was also in another study that I'm sorry, I don't have the date for, I apologize, my sources must be lacking, but that you can take a pair of twins, and due to environmental factors, identical twins, you will see the emergence of different genetic outcroppings in their DNA as these environmental influences vary. Maybe a less specific example of that is looking at the occurrences of obesity, right? You can have people coming from a very similar family, right, genetically, but due to different genetic trees, coming from the same genetic tree, but due to different environmental factors, have different occurrences of obesity and these other things, which are in fact influencing their genes as compared to being influenced by them.
But isn't it true that they actually have those genes within themselves, though?
Right. But you start with genes and you end with genes in a fork in the road, one might say, where you end with a different gene set than you started with of two people. I'm stumbling over my words here. Let me start over. Right? You have two of the same sets of genes starting out. When they're influenced by different environmentals, taking this tree branching road that determines different genetic makeups afterwards. Does that make sense at all? I know I'm stumbling a little bit.
Yeah, I guess I can. You said genes a lot, and my brain went to like, the 401 or whatever, your skinny jeans or your, I went to there for a little bit. You said jeans.
Are you wearing skinny jeans right now?
No, they are slim.
Oh, because mine are too, but they're a little tighter. I've gained a little bit of weight recently, so the blood's, not all in my head.
Is that because your genes?
Yes.
No, that might be because of my genes, but
Is your DNA?
It's largely because of my environmental factors. Jur, as I mentioned earlier, he's really stuck in the fridge well.
Yes, I'm wearing a pair of Husky jeans. I remember as a kid.
Oh, I do remember
Huskies.
Is that Bugle Boys or those were
Wranglers? I wore Wrangler Huskies.
I actually refused to wear jeans till I think ninth grade.
Really?
Yeah, because I always had Bugle Boys, and I grew up really fast, and they were really tight on my body. So I would go into school, and they'd be like, "Hey, nice floods, Alex," and I was like, "Oh, that was a very sad time for me." So I wore sweatpants. Anyways, that has nothing to do with this conversation, but hey, it's good commentary.
So can I reset the
Yes,
far
please.
I've learned a lot, which is really helpful. So this is the OverFunctioning Leadership Podcast.
Yes, for sure. That's where you are. Franz, is that your name?
Franz Klammer.
Yes. Okay. I was just making sure.
And
I should know that.
So on the OverFunctioning Leadership Podcast, we talk about how to improve ourselves as leaders. So thinking about leadership, is it more important that someone comes from good stock and a calm system where the child could almost, I wouldn't say raise themselves, but it's just an environment where kids can flourish? Or is it more important for a parent to spend a lot of time thinking carefully about how to raise a child to be successful, and technique and this nurturing of love and of boundaries? So I see one as freedom, which is the natural side. If things are going really well, just kind of leave well enough alone. And then I see on the nurture side of a lot of to-dos and worry and trying to make sure the child turns out as like a byproduct of raw materials. So from a leadership standpoint, make a case that nature is most important and make a case that nurture really can play a part.
Well, I think it starts. Can I start, Franz?
Your time begins.
Okay. So from a nature side, I think it's one of those things where you think about, is it the chicken or the egg? Well, in this case, it actually is the egg, because we're talking about egg and sperm, correct? I'm a biology teacher, so you can trust everything I say. And so so if you start out with the egg, it starts with the genes. Actually, in an article by Livesley in 1994 in Psychology Today, they talk specifically about genetic vulnerability. So if you have genes that are DNA that's more vulnerable, it actually influences our responses we make to environmental circumstance. So because of the genetic code that we have, it will make us more vulnerable to certain environmental circumstances. And so on my end, since I am strictly nature side, I would say that it is the DNA side. And I could give more examples, but I'll let my opponent here go ahead and respond to that, or have his own response, Franz.
Yes. Yeah, so I would argue that nurture is in fact more important. And I actually have a study here by Michael Sullivan, and it found that actually when looking at juvenile offenders, 70% of the adult offending group had in Bowen's theory, an emotional cutoff relationship with a parent as compared to 5% of the non-offending group. That is to say that 70% of delinquents had some sort of cutoff relationship with their parents as compared to 5% of a non-offending, non-juvenile group. Now, excuse me as I turn my phone back on. If I were to go down here, this actually is very easily addressed by the multi-generational transmission process as described by Murray Bowen. And if I might read here a quote by Peggy Chan. The multi-generational transmission process describes how families pass down anxiety or undifferentiation to members of the family across the generations, and also explains the varying level of functioning of family members across the generations. Through this process, some branches of family decline in their functioning, while those whose parents have higher differentiation are able to increase their functioning over generations. Parents having a better understanding of functional position and automatic reactive patterns and who work on enhancing their emotional functioning will have a better chance of nurturing more functional children in their family life. And then she goes on to say, this echoes one of the Chinese sayings, this generation is not as good as the previous generation.
USA, USA.
China, China, China. And so it's very easy to see there that when you come from a family that understands functionally what it's trying to set out to do, you have a higher likelihood of following it up with more functional children, following down that generational chain.
That was pretty solid.
But where does it start?
Where does it start?
Yeah.
It starts with an individual being...
Which is made up of what?
Genes.
Okay.
Right. We're all composed of genes. That's neither here nor there. But what I'm saying is you take someone in a bad environmental situation, right? And I would say, yeah, sure, you want to say that it's their genes that put them there. What gets them out of it? It's that situation that they're in, the environmental factors. They realize that they need to get out of that situation. If they remain in that situation, they're more likely to have children in that same situation further down the generational train. But if at some point there is someone who has the environmental factors, say a guiding mentor or figure to pull them out of that, they are likely to pass that down.
What would be the advantage of somebody as a guiding member to do that, as a mentor? Where did they get those? How did they figure that out? How do you become a mentor?
How do you become a mentor? I'd say you look at yourself and you'd be like, golly jeepers, I need a mentee.
Golly jeepers. Is none of that connected to genes and DNA at all?
I would say so, but if I take a child, but I would say it's not the predominant factor. If I take a child and throw them in the woods with no other contact, 10 times out of 10, I think they're probably going to die there. 10 times out of 10.
100%.
100%.
Oh, good.
Unless they're raised by a wolf. I think that was a movie once, right?
It's like Tarzan, but that's like an ape.
Yeah, that
Dances with Wolves.
Dances with Wolves.
Wolf Child.
I don't know. There's dancing in that? I don't know. I didn't watch the movie because the word dance was in it.
Yeah. It was a very slow, long, and laborious movie.
I think when I was
Perhaps
young...
you could do a Zammer on it.
Yeah. And I think when
Franz, you were watching our Zammers?
So perhaps one of our listeners could email the ofpodcast@gmail.com and request a Zammer on Dances with Wolves. That'd be awesome.
And I do remember in high school, this is, again, neither here nor there, I remember watching a documentary on a child who had, on some family excursion, been left in the woods and brought back into society. And the main point of the documentary was at which point the human brain had developed past a point where it was able to learn human language. But it was interesting to see how when brought back into these environmental factors with people to nurture this child, it was able to learn how to communicate, albeit non-verbally.
Don't they have predisposition to be able to do that, though?
A predisposition to
be able to survive in the woods and then also learn.
Yeah, a predisposition. But it's the nurture that's the predominant effect. You take that child and it might learn how to survive, right? But it's not going to thrive until you bring it into... it will thrive more quickly if I bring it into an environment that is able to guide, mentor, and nurture it than if I were to just leave it there.
Okay, let's use a different example, perchance. Let's go with somebody who has type A personality.
Okay.
Why are they more encouraged to become a leader?
Who says they're more encouraged to become a leader?
Well, from my experiences and from the experiences of the people that I know are in leadership positions, having a type A personality and being able to take control of things and be really well when it comes to technical solutions, they tend to do really well. Wouldn't that already predisposition them into jumping into a leadership role because they are good at organizing and really good at putting things together?
Okay, but how did you define leadership earlier?
Being able to influence one another.
Yeah, organization doesn't predispose someone to being able to influence someone well. Where do you learn how to be an influencer? Where do you learn how to relate to people? It's in the family first and foremost.
So you're telling me that somebody who has a type A personality, who is let's say, a leader of a business, they're not influencing anybody?
No, I'm saying they're influencing someone, but I'm saying, how about you look at their family? Maybe they were raised in a family of people who are type A people. I know a lot of type A people, since we're talking about our personal experiences, since that's some sort of source here. I know a lot of type A people who were raised by type A people, and that's how they've learned to relate to the world. They have to organize the world. They have to set it in motion, and that is how they relate to people.
Okay, I have another example. How about a child with a disability?
Child with a disability. Okay, what about that?
Okay, so are they influencing and leading their family?
Yeah.
And did their disability make that decision for them?
I would say it did. I would say it's a predominant ability. It is a predominant factor in their ability to relate to people. But if you look at who they're relating to, had they not been in that family, right? Had they not found people to surround and care for them, I doubt that they would have as easily found a group of people they were able to relate to and influence. Who are they influencing in your example?
Well, I'm tossing out here. So if somebody has a disability, regardless of what type of family they're in, aren't they making some sort of influence? I mean, because somebody has to care for them, it's automatic that somebody has to take care of them, and they're in some ways at the hands of somebody else for them to be taken care of. So in some ways, not in some ways, in definite ways, that they are influencing the system that they're put into automatically right from birth.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But let's look at it from the other side. You have to have the caretaker making that conscious choice to care for that child with disabilities, which is the easier choice.
Okay, what if the caretaker doesn't do that?
The environmental factors say that child is likely not going to thrive.
But with somebody who has a disability, and if we're going to just look, obviously you all know my background with my sister and I have a disability, but let's just say somebody has a disability, our society would already say that they're not going to thrive anyway.
Right, and we're talking about leadership here,
And
right?
nature would too, in some ways.
Yeah,
If we're just talking about evolutionary factors,
Yeah.
somebody who has a disability is not going to be able to
reproduce.
Well, that's not necessarily reproduce, but
Right.
not be able to. They're not going to have survival of the fittest just
Yeah.
as well as somebody who's more fit. So when we talk about natural selection, they're not as well prepped for that, but they still have hold a very large influence over people because of their disability, because of what they need.
And I would say that influence is relatively immediate to that group of people taking care of them or who they're interacting with regularly. I would say their social circles are likely not as big. Their web of influence not as large. And so they might have a greater level of influence on a smaller system, but isn't that what we say? That I think what you're arguing is that they're going to bring the level of functioning of the system down because they require care?
Not necessarily that, because as a leadership, and when we're talking about leader, I'm just talking purely influential because of their predisposition and having a disability. That already puts them in a position where they're influencing others. And to say that, if they're not taken care of by a family or whatever, I mean, look at the U.S. right now. Who are the people that we end up taking care of a lot? Is it going to be the people who have disabilities? And so where does that fit in? Are they not having a giant influencing on our society because of their genes?
I might not say giant, but I would agree that you have influence. Let me read here about this brain researcher, Paul McLean. He dates the origin of the family of evolution of mammals to about 180 million years ago. His work is relevant to understanding the forces that promote emotional cutoff. This is from a book about Bowen's theory, referring specifically to emotional cutoff. The evolution of maternal care, he says, was a major innovation, a significant departure from the reptiles. The infant's separation cry co-evolved with the nursing and other nurturing behaviors by mammalian mothers. A consequence of the fine-tuning of sensitivities between the mother and the offspring is the marked suffering triggered by social separation and isolation. The emotional response to the isolation is truly painful. It is a more powerful emotional response than triggered by more obvious threats to survival. And so from that, what I'd like to argue, right, is that when you are in this system, they do have a large influence, but the influence they have is purely because they are in an environment with other people. If I were to separate them from that initial environment and ask them to integrate into another one, I would say that would be a much more difficult decision, and they would require an environment that is conducive to accepting them.
So they have no influence if they go into another environment?
I would say their influence is substantially decreased.
I don't know if I agree with that.
Well, gentlemen, just have a few minutes left. Is there any closing thoughts that you want to have on your side of nature versus nurture? And then I'm going to announce the winner.
Well, on my case, I am nature. We are nature. You are all nature. And with that, your DNA predispositions where you're going to what's going to happen to you in a lot of ways. And so, I gave the example of somebody with disability or somebody with type A personality. They already thrust into a position of influencing because of the DNA that they started out with. And despite whatever system they're put into and they're moved into different systems, they are still influencing a system based off of their DNA. You can sit here, you can talk about how they'll be put in woods and stuff, but that doesn't happen. People aren't put into woods in isolation. So even if they are, let's say that they're put into a mental hospital and they're put into a room by themselves, still influencing the overall system because of who's paying for them to be there. The society is still having an influence over what's going on. So those are because of those reasons and because of all of the wonderful articles that I had prepared before time, and I'm not figuring them out on my phone right now and not paying attention. I believe that nature is the best here.
Okay.
Yes, Zach.
Well, I agree that people aren't being thrown into woods, and that's exactly my argument for nurture. We nurture people to show our influence over them, to relate to them, to lead them to greener pastures. And so I would actually like to circle back to that question that I fumbled as sort of a finishing point. There was actually this study done in 2009 with some mouse pups, and what they did was they cross-fostered some of these pups, and they had 10 genetic loci that they were studying. And of these 10 genetic loci, of the ones that were fed through, they were nursed by a foster mother as compared to a genetic mother, they noticed that 4 of these 10 markers differed among these initially genetically similar mouse pups. And so while we are talking about genes existing...
About mice.
Apparently
we're
pups,
mice now.
Yeah. I would just like to say that the environment is actually imparting, as this study says, genetic imprinting. It is affecting our genetic makeup as we are going through life. And so I would like to argue that it is the environment around you that is actually affecting the base genetic makeup that you have. And so it is very important, I would say, dare say, more important, the environment that you're in, the relationships and influences that you have upon you that affect your ability to lead and to grow rather than nature.
Mice pups.
Yeah, well, that was a wonderful debate back and forth on nature versus nurture. And as the moderator, I don't have to be neutral. I have to pick sides. And I think the winner
Wait,
is...
wait. As the moderator, you have to pick sides? I love it. I thought you were the mediator.
I'm the moderator, mediator.
The mediator. Mediator is all about me.
The meaty moderator.
So I'm going to announce the winner, and that might, if the Russians hack this podcast, then Putin perhaps is the winner. But absent of that, I'm going to announce Zac as the winner because he said something about mouse pups, which I don't know much about, but that was really cool. And that's the last thing I heard. So that's the winner, Zac.
Oh, it's a bunch of baloney.
Because you went last. So.
Woo!
Boo.
And as we know, Dr. Hager adds, this is significant because it shows that genes not only interact with the environment, but also epigenetic effects.
Okay, well, I tried my best.
You did try.
I'm going to be honest with you. When I knew that I had to have the nature side, I realized it wasn't a very good side to start with.
And the mouse pups.
Mouse pups. Well, I don't like to bring in other animals because they have nothing to do with the humans, but that's cool. No big deal.
Yeah.
You can bring up mouse pups. I actually read that article.
Oh, yeah?
Anyways, yeah,
Did you? And chose not to include it?
Yes, because it was about mice. Anyways.
Of mice and men.
Yes, of mice and men. So something that I think, really how I really feel about this, I think it's a little bit of both. I think there is a predisposition, but I do strongly agree that it is the nurture side. So if we even just look at, okay, I'm allergic to different things. You can be allergic to, I can be allergic to a dog today, and then literally tomorrow those genes can be shut off because of environmental factors and not be allergic to the dog anymore. So clearly environmental factors are playing with your DNA. So even though I fought really hard for the nature side, I
would say
knew I was going to lose.
It's some combination of the two. I think everyone would agree to that. It's the interplay that makes it so interesting. I'm never going to sprout and grow wings. That's just part of the predisposition of my genetic makeup. But there are capabilities and capacities that I can fulfill or not fulfill through the environment that I'm a part of. And also, one of the studies that I chose not to include because of its absurdity, but this guy actually argues that you give him 10 children and he can raise those children to be a specific profession regardless of the child, 10 times out of 10. You give him a child, he can raise that child to be successfully in some sort of field, in some sort of specific job role, whatever, successfully, capably, exceptionally.
Wait,
and I
what?
thought that was really, really odd.
Yeah, what fields are we talking about here? Is he choosing the fields?
He was exceptionally vague. But no.
Okay.
You give him the kid and you tell him what you want them to be, and he will somehow environmentally determine.
Virtuoso.
Yeah.
No, I think I read that same study. It was 3 things. It was give him the kid, the job, and a gun, and it's done.
I must have read it a abbreviated version of that article. I only got to the kid part.
I just got that on the, what's it called? Swably? What's the
Swably? I don't know what that
It's not Cliff Notes. It's now the kids.
Oh, I don't
check
know.
all the time.
I don't know. Cliff Notes. I have no idea.
Instead of Cliff Notes, it's something else online. Schmoop. No. Schmoop.
Schmoop. I think it is Schmoop.
Yeah, Schmoop.
Which sounds like some sort of
What
kiss
is-
you got
what is
from
Schmoop?
Your aunt. Does it not? I got schmooped up.
Let me schmoop you on the cheek. Come over here.
Yeah. It's how the
Something I don't want.
It's how the mouse pups show intimacy.
With their foster mother.
Stupid mouse pups are back at it. Oh boy. Well, yeah, and I also read the articles about the twins and them being separated. It is true. I mean, you have twins. We see this all the time, even with humans, right? It's just the environment that they're in. But their genes are the same. The DNA is the same.
Yeah.
But the way that their genes react to the environment based off of perhaps, their anxiety that they're having, depending upon who they are. Because those 2 different twins will have different amounts of anxiety based off of how they're treated, because they're not going to be treated the same. It doesn't even mean by their parents, but their environment, right? Their system. And so that's going to turn off or turn on certain parts of their DNA, which will then change different types of things.
It'll do stuff.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
And the American in me says that their nurture side will win because we'll just tighten up our bootstraps. And gosh darn it, if I'm going to be Kevin Love, I'm going to be Kevin Love, dang it.
I mean, all I could think of when you were saying that is tighten up our bootstraps and hand out participation trophies. That's what we do.
Oh, well, anything else about this nature versus nurture debate, which I don't know, while you were looking there, there were so many articles, like I said at the beginning of this, that like they were like, enough of this discussion.
It's not a good discussion to have.
But I felt like I had a good time.
No, it was not a good discussion. You guys dissed my mouse pups.
And they're schmooping of each other.
I know if I wanted to inject you with something right now, Alex, I would have to do some sort of FDA study on mice first. We both know that's true.
Especially when it comes to your cosmetics.
Exactly.
We got to put them on the mice first.
Your concealer.
Yeah.
We all know you struggle with the pimples.
Oh, boy. Anyways, well, with that, I think we're going to wrap this thing up. You can check us out on iTunes, on Google Play, YouTube, Simplecast.
You can contact us at theofpodcast@gmail.com. That's theofpodcast@gmail.com.
And there's also rumors of a website.
Yes, we have a website in the works where we'd like to eventually be releasing articles, hosting links to separate resources, our favorite books, a personal biography of John, and how he came to be where he is today.
You know, I once bowled a 300. That's part of my biography.
That is definitely in there. Yeah, he's got a lot of good little nuggets like that.
Little nuggets. And then we'd also like to thank Jesse Huffstetler for the music. You can check him out, Jetler, on Spotify. I don't know how else you can contact him, but maybe just email us and we'll get you in touch.
Find him on Facebook. And is it the Schmoop Limiter? I think I'd like to have the Schmoop Limiter.
The Schmoop Face Limiter. No, that's the Starfish Limiter, right?
Yeah,
it is.
But I personally would like to have the Schmoop.
We'll contact Jesse and have him get on that immediately.
No, and you need to contact my aunt.
Your aunt. No, I can't handle that.
Okay.
Too much schmoop.
I think that's going to wrap us up on the Schmoop here. And with that, I'm Alex. I'm East Proactive.
I'm Franz.
And I'm Zac.
Okay, we'll catch you next time.
Adios.
See you later.